That will take us to item number 3, which is a briefing on the status of remaining GO bond funds.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eric Bailey, the Deputy Director of Capital Delivery Services, and appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today to share information on where we're at with the 2016 through 2022 bond program. We're going to split the presentation here a little bit. I'm going to talk about the past bond stuff, and Kim's going to talk a little bit about certificates of obligation and some of the other funding mechanisms that we have. Next slide. So we'll go, perfect, there we go. We'll go over the overall remaining general obligation bonds. The balances in the data that we're going to show are the fiscal 26 quarter 1 close, which is December 31st, for 12, 16, 18, 20, and 22. And then Kim's going to talk a little bit about the certificates of obligation and the other contractual obligations, as well as a bond sale and options that are available for reallocation and or deauthorization from a general legal standpoint. So before I get really started into this, I want to go from an overall aspect for the 2012 through 2022 bonds. These investments include a total appropriation of $2.45 billion and represent over 1,200 individual projects. And those range from simple crosswalk installations to large-scale engineering projects and affordable housing investments. Of that $2.45 billion, $1.5 billion is spent, and that represents all payments in the program. Those go to construction contractors, engineers, architects, and for real estate acquisition. So on the upcoming slides, you'll see expenses shown here in green, which represent dollars out the door. And these are for design consultant work, construction contracts, everything that we've spent on the bond projects. These are a great measure of the completed work for the past bond programs. And in those programs, we've completed over 700 projects, representing an investment of $865 million, with an additional 134 projects that are currently in construction. The value of those projects is $444 million. You'll see on the slides this obligation in dark blue. That's a key metric that we use here at CDS to monitor the money that's under contract. These dollars are encumbered in a contract that's been authorized by the council that the city has yet to spend. So in the case of the bond program, obligation mostly refers to large construction contracts where the city's entered into the agreement with the contractor to build the project. It's currently underway and progressing, but it's not complete yet. And finally, when we talk about balance, which is shown in light blue, these amounts are not just floating out there free for use. Nearly 100% of the bond programs have identified future spending for that balance money. Project managers in our department and the other departments that deliver CIP create a spending plan in eCapri for each project that details how much money is going to be spent and when. The data is shown on the spending plan line and some of the backup documentation included in this presentation. And that balance number is funding that's not currently spent or under contract, but the project team has a plan to spend these funds in the coming years as the project moves through the design process into construction. Historically, the city doesn't move forward with project designs without funding that's been identified for the construction costs. When we move forward with several bond elections in quick succession, it put a financial strain on the city that we're currently dealing with as it relates to our existing financial commitments and the alignment of those commitments with the needs of the community. In the historic bond programs, one of the major issues was that the projects were not fully developed prior to the bond election. For example, with the 2016 bond corridor program, the projects were at the concept level when we went to the voters and they hadn't been fully vetted. The preliminary work was not complete, and it caused extensive delays in the program as many challenges were addressed, the scopes were clarified, realistic budgets and schedules were developed, and projects were coordinated for construction as the program moved through the design process. The proper planning and evaluation of bond projects is one of the reasons that CDS was created, guiding the bond development through to make sure the projects are ready to be evaluated by council and the voters, and ensure that the scopes, schedules, and budgets are accurate and that we can deliver on that 6-year general obligation bond interval. So I'm going to brag a little bit about CDS. In the past 2 years, we've contracted over $500 million in GO bond funds, and in the last year alone, we've spent over $200 million in bond-funded CIP design and construction contracts. Right now, we're currently experiencing a large increase in construction contract bidding, contract award, and project completions. So the remaining fund balances that we have left in the presentation are concentrated in a few projects in each bond year. There's about 20 projects that account for 60% of the non-housing bond balance, and we've highlighted those in the presentation here. In addition to the main slides that we show, we've also included more detailed backup that has data on individual propositions and programs, showing spending and obligation over time. And the data, as I mentioned before, the data in these main slides is based on the 26 quarter one results, and the backup information includes up-to-date data through the end of January as well. So for the 2012 bond, that bond is 97% spent with an additional $3.7 million in contractual encumbrances. The two primary remaining projects here are the East 51st Street revitalization, which includes roadway improvements on 51st Street from I-35 to Berkman. It's currently in the 90% design phase. That's due in March, and construction is scheduled to start in 2027. Transportation and Public Works has identified additional funding for the construction of this project, and this one's experienced delays for several reasons, code changes related to the Atlas 14 flood model requirements, as well as a design consultant that had to be terminated for lack of performance. Second one up here is the Waller Creek District confluence linked to Palm Park. The 100% design drawings are in the permitting process now. As you can imagine, this project requires considerable coordination with the confluence and I-35 Capital Express Central projects. It is scheduled to bid in 2026. So for the 2016 bond program, of the $184 million in balance, 169 of that is in the corridor program. The corridor program currently has 10 projects in construction with a value of $68 million, and there are 7 other projects that are in the design process with a total cost of $92 million. In the last 2 years, the corridor program has contracted $133 million and spent over $60 million as it moves into its primary construction phase. There are several projects here that are nearing the end of design and moving towards bid and award in 2026, including South Lamar Boulevard from Barton Springs to IH-71, estimated bond cost of $36 million. East MLK from 183 to Decker Lane, an estimated cost of $7 million. North Lamar from Runberg to Parmer at $13 million. And we have actually a recently awarded construction contract for Burnett Road from Bright Verde to Mopac at $28 million. In these numbers here, there's also a $16 million contingency account that is there for if bond prices or the bid prices come back higher than expected. That money is planned to be used for construction on smaller programmatic projects on the corridors if that risk doesn't materialize. Another subset of the 2016 bond is the regional improvements. There's a remaining balance of $14.2 million here. It's primarily in the Lakeline Boulevard improvements from Lyndhurst to Parmer for $8.2 million. That project is at 90% design. And the West Runberg Lane extension from Burnett to Metric for $3.5 million. That project obtained a Campo grant and is currently at 60% design. Finally, the local mobility programs, and local mobility is composed of things like safe routes to school, bikeways, sidewalks, Vision Zero, some standard streets, have $1.1 million remaining and are at 99% obligated. For the 2018 bond, there are several propositions that are 95% or greater obligated. Those include the affordable housing, flood mitigation and open space, health and human services, and public safety propositions. Propositions B, C, and G make up 98% of the remaining balance for the entire program. Projects that are included in Prop B are the Doherty Arts Center at $22.3 million, the Mexicarte Museum at $14.7 million, and the Asian American Resource Center Phase 2 at $4.6. Doherty and Mexicarte are both in the design process, and AARC is entering the construction phase. The remaining funding in Prop C is in 3 primary categories: parkland improvements at $9.8 million, building renovations at $6.2, and parkland land acquisition at $4.9. And then finally, the rest of Prop G has the one remaining project from the transportation proposition for the Redbud Trail Bridge over Lady Bird Lake at $36.1 million. that's undergoing a design evaluation to align the project scope with the funding that's available in that proposition. For the 2020 bond, it was a transportation-only bond for $460 million. The proposition included several categories, including major capital improvements, sidewalks, urban trails, Vision Zero, substandard streets, bikeways, safe routes to school, local transit, and neighborhood partnering. There's some unobligated funds remaining in all of these categories. However, major capital improvements, substandard streets, and urban trails represent the bulk of those unobligated funds. The major CIP category includes funding for the Congress Avenue Urban Design Initiative from Riverside Drive to 11th Street, the Barton Springs Road Bridge, South Pleasant Valley Corridor improvements, and the Longhorn Dam Wishbone Bridge. Of these projects, there's $22 million left in the Congress Avenue project, which has a portion already under construction, and there's a $29 million funding resource account. Again, that's a construction contingency account, and those have yet to be distributed to individual projects. It's important to note here that the Barton Springs Road Bridge doesn't have construction funding that's currently allocated to the sub-project. Working on allocating the matching funds from a Federal Highway Administration grant of $32 million that was received by Transportation and Public Works. And then finally, on the Longhorn Dam Wishbone Bridge, that project is actually substantially complete. There's a ribbon cutting coming up this week, and so that's a great example of a project that was well designed and thought out before the bond election and was able to be completed within a 6-year time frame. So we talk about the substandard streets category. There's 2 projects there. Johnny Morris Road at $5.6 million, which is at the 90% design phase and moving through permitting. And the other substandard street is Ross Road North at $4 million, which is currently in construction. The urban trails category includes funding for the Shoal Creek Trail, Bergstrom Spur West, Bergstrom Spur East, as well as a resource account to be used as contingency for several other projects that are being delivered with this funding. All these urban trail projects are moving through the design process and scheduled to start construction in late 2026 or early 2027. I know that's a lot of information, go through really quickly, but again, I'd like to say that there's additional backup behind the presentation where there's more details about the individual programs and spending. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim to discuss the COs and other funding mechanisms. Oh, I'm sorry, I got housing. Housing's one left. So housing is a little bit different than the other bond funding projects in that the city contributes to developers to establish low-income housing that's restricted for that use. And so there's not the incremental spending and obligation as you move forward. The 2022 bond has affordable housing for rental housing, ownership, home repair, and land acquisition. And the money that's in there can be used for any of those purposes. In talking with our folks in housing, the original plan was to have that fully spent by the end of 2027. However, because of the pending discussion that we're having related to the bond program, they're able to stretch or contract that funding depending on what the needs may be. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kim.
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to ask the question on housing because this is top of mind for me. So the $166 million that shows as a balance, staff has identified uses for all of those dollars at this point.
I'm going to phone a friend.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nicole Jocelyn. I'm the Housing and Community Development Officer for the Housing Department. We have, for the $166 million balance, we have a portion of those funds that have been awarded to projects but have not closed on their financing. So some of those projects, just due to regular market forces, may not get to closing. So we would be able to reallocate those funds to other projects. And then we have a portion of those funds that have not yet been awarded. So we would be able to stretch the funds that we have not yet awarded in this fiscal year and then the next fiscal year over the next 3 years and be able to take back some of the funds for projects that won't be closing and allocate those to other projects.
About how much do we have that have not been awarded yet?
So we have $180 million that have been committed. Oh, and $166 million that have not, remains uncommitted. Okay, so maybe I misspoke there. So $166 million have not been committed 2 projects.
So essentially, the balance that's left for housing is uncommitted at this point, and staff has not identified uses for them.
We do have projects that are in a funding round right now for our Housing Development Assistance Program that we're considering right now. So we have about $30 million, I believe, in gap financing assistance requested, and then we have a portfolio of vacant land that we will need gap financing for to develop. So I believe we issued a memo about 2 weeks ago. The 3 projects that we are going to be moving forward with solicitations on have about $50 million of gap financing. But the projects that will be funded with those funds go through our normal housing development assistance application cycle, which we have moved to a twice a year application cycle.
And if I could just build a little bit on what Nicole is saying, Mandy DeMeo, Deputy Director of the Housing Department, we have programmed all the dollars, $350 million. We originally programmed them into these 4 different major programs: rental housing, ownership, home repair, and land acquisition, over a 5-year spend plan. That was the original plan. So as Eric mentioned, that would have us finishing up in FY27. However, because of these conversations, rather than a 5-year spend plan, we're looking at a 6-year spend plan to take us through FY28. So we would just, in the coming 3 years, reprogram those dollars in order to fit the proposed 6-year spend plan. But our budget internally accommodates all 4 programs. For example, home repair is a 5-year contract with nonprofit organizations that we do 5 years every year. That is extended over 5 years. In this case, we would be extending it over 6 years and then reprogramming it internally to accommodate that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. That's helpful.
Thanks. Ms. Alvarez?
Mayor, I'm sorry. Could I
Yes.
follow up right quick?
Sure. Don't go
I'm
too
sorry.
far.
I didn't quite get the answer to Councilmember Fuentes' question, though, of in terms of that balance, how much has been committed again. And I understand that there's a number of projects where we've already promised them money that, let's say 10%, 20%, whatever, are not going to go through. And so we're going to have that available again. And then there's another chunk of money where we haven't promised that to anybody, or that's just free and open. What are those numbers? And then again, I know the projects that you can't, obviously you predict which projects are not going to move, but what is the amount that's pending that we have not promised it, anything like that?
I believe I misspoke earlier. I think the $166 million is uncommitted.
With a caveat, the $166 million, I apologize, the $166 million is, in fact, technically uncommitted. However, as Nicole mentioned, you all received a memo from our team about the AHFC, Austin Housing Finance Corporation, our vacant land prioritization. We have plans based on what you received in that in that memo. We have plans to put out solicitations for 3 parcels in the coming year to year and a half. That will require up to $50 million in gap financing. That up to $50 million is included in that $166 million in the light blue.
So there's $166 million that is uncommitted. But
Correct.
up to $50 million of that is money you know where you want to spend it.
Yes.
And you believe you will.
Yes.
That is correct. And then an additional about $50 million should be awarded through our ROTA and ODA, rental housing and ownership housing, competitive application cycles. We have 2 cycles this fiscal year, so then we subtract out that as well.
So that's a second and third bucket that's up to $50 million. That's also part of that 166 of uncommitted money.
That is correct. So based on that uncommitted, that light blue line, the $166 million, we have internally projected out how those funds would be spent this fiscal year and next year's fiscal year. Based on these conversations, we're reprogramming based on upcoming 3 fiscal years. And we're able to do that.
Thank you very much. That's the best explanation I've got for that number. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Might have to have a second.
All right, we really mean it, Ms. Olivares. It's your turn.
No worries. Kim Olivares, Director of Financial Services. So in my last presentation to Audit and Finance on our updated debt capacity projections, I made it clear then, and I want to stress this again today, is that when it comes to our debt capacity and when we refer to GO bonds are bonds that are backed by the general obligation, full faith and credit of the taxing authority of the city of Austin. So that includes not only voter-approved bonds, but non-voter approved bonds. So your voter-approved bonds that Eric just aptly detailed are the public improvement bonds, voter-approved, and then we have certificates of obligation and PPFCOs, contractual obligations, that fill out the remainder of that general obligation credit. So with our COs, the remaining authorized but unissue totals just over $790 million. Now, COs are similar to the public improvement bonds in that they have a 20-year payback period. So the biggest difference is that, again, it is non-voter approved. So I've broken it out into various categories here to provide a little more detail on what makes up that $790 million. First, facility renovations. And I want to note also that with these facility renovations and the new facilities in particular, these acquisitions, this work, these projects were all part of an extensive multi-year, actually decade-plus effort relative to our facilities planning as we've been working to get ourselves out of lease space. And then when the office market had some significant challenges, we leapt in and took advantage of that to be able to speed up our transition away from lease spaces, but also address existing facility conditions that in many cases are very concerning. So with our facility renovations, there's about $30 million related to citywide capital facility rehab that our facilities management department leads. We also have EMS fire station renovations, about $10 million. Town Lake Center will have the final last 50% issuance on that in the upcoming sale. We're actually almost at a substantial completion on that renovation, and we'll be having staff move into that building here in just a few months. And then finally, various parks facility renovations. From our new facilities, that is a much more sizable number. The Northeast Service Center, that is a project that has been on the to-do list for years. And it was in the recent couple of years that we were finally able to bring that forward and really address some very significant and long needed improvements to the facilities that our fleet and ARR folks are working in. I also want to note of that project, total project cost, which is around $254 million, the 47% of it is self-supported by debt service payments coming directly from departments like enterprise type departments. So that means 53% of it is hitting against the debt service tax rate. I think that's also important for folks to understand. When it comes to our GO credit rating, it doesn't mean that every bit of it is being paid for from the debt service portion of the tax rate. There are some unique situations in which the debt is actually being paid for without property tax dollars. So this is one of those unique situations. And it is and I wanted to point it out because it is such a sizable project. Also, our public safety campus, the acquisition we were able to make for both the campus and then the public safety warehouse, there's $100 million left to issue there. There were a series of new fire stations that were built throughout the city. There's about $16.7 million left there. And then the University Park acquisition, there's about $6.8 million left there. And that facility was acquired so that we can move out of One Texas Center and make much better use of that site. Also a building that is in not the best of conditions. Nothing. Oh, okay. So next up is land acquisition. There's $50 million sitting in that fund. However, acquisitions from that fund are actively happening, going through appraisals and the sort. Parks, transportation, infrastructure. This is a large swath of projects, but with cap and stitch, there's 104 million. So there's both, that includes both a CO and the SIB loan. The SIB loan, it is basically like a private placement CO, so it's included in there. There's also various road projects, Breaker, Samsung, Lakeline, Jane Lane, and Meadow Creek for about 24 million. Sidewalks, there's 10 million. Longhorn Dam, that we have about 3 million for some immediate needs, but we are definitely having some continued conversations about long-term and permanent solutions for addressing that dam's condition. And then there's a smattering of dollars amongst shade structures, trail repair, and a bridge replacement in Roy G. Guerrero Park. Finally, there's our TERS and related investments. So Colony Park, that's 121 million. That is all COs, but it is supported by the revenues generated by that TERS, not the debt service portion of the tax rate. Similarly, with Waller Creek, the vast majority of that 77 million is supported by TERS revenue. There are others, there's a small amount in there that is being supported by donations that the Waterloo Greenway is securing as well. So for our contractual obligations, this is a little bit different than your PIBs and your COs because it's a much shorter payback period because contractual obligations is for personal property that is movable, so vehicles, equipment, things of that nature. There was a time, and this is one of those I'm showing, I'm an old lady around here. There was a time many, many, many years ago when we actually would use cash savings from the prior fiscal year to be able to cover the cost of vehicles and equipment like this in the next fiscal year. But over time, for a variety of reasons, and also because just the prices of vehicles has increased so significantly, we have shifted to this PPFCO structure to buy them. So that's why you see 164 million for vehicles and equipment noted on the latter half of the slide, but also in the first half. State law changed not too long ago that allows for us to utilize this shorter term debt for technology solutions because similar to vehicles, technology solutions have also become increasingly expensive. So being able to finance these things over even a short time frame of 5 to 7 years is much more ideal for the city and for the taxpayers. So that has supported things like our investments in the human capital management system, our financial system, and also Amanda for licensing and permitting. And the other bonus with PPFCOs is that your interest rate is incredibly low because it is such a short-term debt. So it's not that much more of an additional cost total to be able to cover those projects. And finally, one other thing I wanted to note, just to kind of be a refresher of like what is the general timeline for a bond sale. So and that bond sale includes both voter and non-voter approved debt. So if a bond program is approved by the voters or if council approves a non-voter approved debt, there has to be an action that is authorizing that debt, whether it's the voters or council. Then city council ultimately approves all the project appropriations and a corresponding reimbursement resolution, which is a wonderful tool that the IRS gives us where we are able to maintain the tax exempt status and issue the debt at a later date on a reimbursement basis. So we are not beginning to pay debt service on debt that we haven't actually even spent on the associated projects. So once the project has the work is completed, the expenditures incurred, and payments are made, we then in that following year will do this bond sale to reimburse the city for those payments. So we do our GO sale basically every August so that it times with the new fiscal year and the corresponding debt service payments. So the benefits of utilizing that process, you're able, when you do a single issuance per year, your bond issuance costs are much better because there are certain amounts that are the amount is what it is, and it's not relative to the size of the actual sale. So by doing it all at once and paying those costs a single time, that creates a savings. Also with the reimbursement resolution process, we're able to avoid unnecessary interest cost, and it also gives us some flexibility in the actual sales timing, and it also helps us handle market conditions in a more efficient way as well. So the last thing that we were asked to discuss was reallocation and deauthorization. Now, when it comes to remaining bond funds, the desire is to reallocate them from one project to another. No matter what, you have to use them for one of the purposes that was named in the original proposition. So, for example, transportation proposition might name road construction, sidewalks, bikeways, or similar. Now, if you're reallocating dollars from sidewalks, you would have to use it for bikeways or road reconstruction or whatever the case may be. So you cannot use it for something in a different proposition. So, for example, I can't take sidewalk money and use it for parks facilities. You might also require council action depending on the intended new use. So if, for example, there are remaining funds sitting in a smattering, and I'm not trying to pick on sidewalks, but that's what keeps popping in my mind. But if there are a smattering of funds that still remain in a variety of sidewalks projects, you can sweep those remaining funds and use them for other sidewalk purposes without council action because of the manner in which you appropriated them in the first time, which is on a programmatic basis. Now, if the funds were appropriated for roadway construction and you want to shift to sidewalks, then council would have to take action for the reallocation. The same also applies to if the funds were appropriated for a specific project and you wanted to use it for another purpose. Now, it's also important to know if you're reallocating funds from a specific project that was also a named project in the contract with the voters, we would need to explore if there's any flexibility on making that change because you would still be eventually issuing those bonds, which I will talk a little bit more in the deauthorization options section. So if you were to want to deauthorize any of the remaining bond funds, you have two options. You can call an election at which the voters are able to decide if they want to deauthorize those funds or not. You also have, if you wanted to deauthorize and reauthorize for a new purpose, so just basically reallocating the existing funds but for a completely new purpose than what they were originally approved for, then you can have those as ballot on the same ballot and make them contingent upon another, so that if they pass the new authorization, it can only pass if the deauthorization passes as well. Then there's also the staleness doctrine. So we have found there's not very specific case law, but based on prior actions from the AG's office, we know that you generally have the authority to deauthorize the bond funds if 10 years have passed since the election. That 10-year time frame is where there's a question mark. There's not that clear case law, but based on other instances that have gone to the AG's office, that 10-year mark appears to be kind of that sweet spot as the minimum barrier. So when it comes to the contracts with the voters, so each of those contracts was passed by council. It is contingent on the issuance of bonds. So if the bonds are never issued, the contract has no effect. However, if you are looking to reallocate those bonds or those dollars to other items that would not match up with the contract with the voters, that's where we have to start being much more careful and making sure we're not in violation of that as we make those or consider those changes. So, clear as mud. Any questions you may have?
Anybody got questions? Councilmember Alter?
Thank you very much. This provided a lot of information. I really appreciate it because one of the reasons why I've been really interested in what we have outstanding is to see if there's a way to integrate the large projects that are still out there into our thinking about the 26 bond. And I'll give an example. One in District 5, the South Lamar Corridor Project, which was a 2016 bond project. They've been told, the community, it will start it last year, we'll start it this year, now they're being told maybe next fall. I mean, it is almost a running joke at meetings I go to that, 10 years and we're still talking about when we're even going to start this project. And be it as it may, that's where we are today. But my question in all of this is, staff provided us a really comprehensive list of not only what you'd recommend, but here's how things score out, right? Here's the priority, whether it's the environmental priority, the community priority, but here's a set of things that we looked at, metrics, to decide what are our highest priorities. And would the South Lamar corridor, if we put that into today's matrix, would that be at the top? Would it be at the middle? Would it be at the bottom? If it's more of the latter, should we be thinking about these projects that are still, the bridge project you talked about and others? Should we be thinking about what are the needs of today, not what did we think the needs were in 2016? Because those are funds that can be reallocated, as you mentioned, Ms. Oliveros, within at least that proposition. So we know we're going to have transportation-related projects. We have those needs. We know we're going to have parks and others. So I would love for us to think about a way to look at, if it's $500,000, maybe not worth your time and effort, right? But if there are substantial sums of dollars for large projects that we haven't done yet, can we think about, is that still a priority today given the other priorities that we have? And that's just, I don't know how we do that. I don't know that we've ever done that before, but almost treat these as new or undone projects. And yes, we've spent some design money, and maybe that design gets put on the shelf for another day, and it's a great design we can pick up again and modify. It's not full money lost, but I think it's incumbent upon us, given the financials that are the reality, we only have so much to go around. We should fund the priorities that we have.
And take into account what Mr. Rogers was also saying earlier about deliverability and those aspects as well. Other comments? Yes, Councilmember Fuentes.
Thank you. And this is either for ACM Rogers or Mr. Bailey, if he's still here. There was a comment made that best practice is that you wouldn't put funding towards design unless the construction funding has also been identified. Is that right?
Historically, we don't progress with design contracts through design unless the construction funding is also available. So we don't generally just do design-only projects. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it is in the rules around bonding for those projects because of the long duration payback for those. So there's some financial rules around it. But then also, like I said, historically, we just haven't done that. So.
Okay. So it's standard practice for the city to bake in both of those costs at the same time?
Correct, yes.
And that's what we've done even with the 2020 mobility bond?
Yes.
And one thing I want to surface, colleagues, I sit on the Campo board is, for that board, they're moving towards, their criteria has now been updated to really prioritize projects that are shovel ready to go. And so how does that affect what we might consider with our own local bond projects, knowing that the local match is so critical in positioning our projects for federal funding?
Yeah, so generally what we do is we will have the full bucket of funding that's available to deliver the project, and then we'll apply for those grant funds as we move forward. The Barton Springs Road Bridge is a great example of that, where we had the money have the money that's available to do the full construction. We apply for grants along the way. Usually there's a match. Generally it's 80-20, 20 city, 80 from the federal government. And then once we obtain that, we're able to say, okay, we now have money that's available in that bucket that we can potentially reallocate to other projects. For example, in the way that we write the propositions, we say generally structural improvements to existing bridges. And so there's a lot of opportunity there where we can then take whatever money we get from the grant funding and whatever's available to repurpose it for another project.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Duchin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys for the update. I wanted to clarify a number that I heard at the beginning relative to other numbers that I think I've heard recently on the same topic of what progress we've made towards spending down the amount of outstanding bond dollars that are out there. I thought I heard at the beginning total amount of $2.45 billion that we've spent $1.5 billion, which would leave about $950. Is that, did I mishear that? Because I also heard, I think at the beginning of this, sorry, the other data point I heard recently was when I started last year, we had about $1.3 billion that was unspent, and we're now down to $700 million.
So the 2.4 billion is all the programs in sum together. That's all the money that's related with the bond programs. The number that I mentioned, we're actually at $600 million in terms of authorized but unobligated dollars, and that's down from it was 1.4 in mid 2023. So that
so none of my numbers are right, is what you're telling me.
Well,
okay.
No. Actually, you're right. There was when we had our orientation, we were at the class again, and it was 1.34. So that at that particular time, it was 1.34 billion that was unspent.
Thank you for making me feel better. What can we expect at the end of this year? What is the sort of projected spend by the time we get into, say, the end of the year, or perhaps, going into what could be a vote on a bond in 26, depending on how things shake out?
Yeah, the best graph that shows that overall is actually in the appendix there. There's one of the charts that really shows what the projected spend is, which is the purple line there. And so I don't have the exact number in front of me, but eyeballing it's about 1.4 billion by the end of 2027. And so we're projecting that 90% spend in 2028.
Thank you. And then the last question I've got now is, and I appreciate the update, HCM Rogers on the dashboard. I know that's conversations we've also had with Capital Delivery. I'm curious to know when we can expect some of that information to start to be deployed, and just a general timeline of our expectations there.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's really important for us to really focus on the delivery of what we've got, as we really need to build that trust back with our community. And so as a part of the process right now, we're as we just talked about, looking at working with consultants and others. We're looking at everything that's related to how do we do a strategic implementation plan for those projects. So we're developing that strategic implementation plan, and we should have that completed by the time these decisions have to be made with the whole bond. And well, it's going to take us probably 4 to 5 months to be able to have a true report that has the whole strategic plan. But within that plan, it's also looking at the technology that's going to be needed, working with our ATS and our other teams to ensure that we're all working on the same page with the same technology that meets the needs. Also doing the benchmarking of other cities, and there's quite a few other cities throughout this region that do a really good job where you can actually go on their websites and see where those projects are at any particular point. And so those are the things that we are, those are all scheduled for this year. Let's just put it that way, to have those complete this year.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I got now.
Good deal. Anything else? Thank you all very, very much. Good report. Well, members, that concludes all of the items that are on the agenda for this special called meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee of the Austin City Council. So without objection, the Audit and Finance Committee is adjourned at 2:27 p.m. Thanks, everybody.